Alright everyone, well this week I thought we'd do something a little different, do some illustrating stuff. What we're going to be doing is creating some stage light effects, and I've seen this in a whole bunch of images and photographs. Looking at the lights and everything, it's like the straight beams of light that come down on a band while they're playing, and I thought, I could draw those pretty easily instead of shooting them. So I messed around with it, came up with a pretty good result here. So here I have a document that I'm going to create the light beams in, and then I have a separate document here that we're going to apply them to. Here you can see I've simply got a simple silhouette of a band on stage. You can see it's on its own layer, and we'll get back to this in just a moment. So we're going to start by creating the beam itself. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer on this. Notice I'm working on a black background because we're creating lights, so it needs the contrast of a dark background. So we will begin by going into the toolbar and choosing this tool right here, the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm just going to draw a very long rectangular shape right down the middle of my document here. Now, making sure we are on that new blank layer, I'm going to fill it with white, and I'm just going to press Command Delete, it would be Control Backspace, as long as your colors are set to their default black and white, which you can see right here. So there we have a nice white box in the middle of my document. Well, now I want to create a gradient selection. That's right, I said a gradient selection on this particular shape. There's only one way to do that. Well, there's several ways, but the way I like to do it is using the quick mask mode. We can't really draw a gradient selection using any of the standard selection tools because all they do is just draw a selection and you've got your marching ants. Well, to create that gradient selection, what it does is when you go to quick mask mode, you're basically visually painting your selections onto your document. So I'm just going to press the letter Q, or you can go down here to the very bottom of your toolbar. It's a second from the bottom icon right here. You click on it once and it puts you in quick mask mode. And just to be sure, if you go over in the channels palette there, you can see it's a little quick mask. It's basically an alpha channel. It's a temporary alpha channel, but it's giving you the visual cue of working with the selection in a visual sense. In fact, if you go in here into the toolbar and double click on that icon, it'll open up the quick mask options. And here we can see that we want the color to indicate the selected areas, and you can actually choose the color of the mask and the opacity. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that green, and you can see right here, just to give you a quick demo, if I take a brush tool with a very light or a very soft edge brush and just paint on here, of course we're not in quick mask mode because we went back to the normal mode. Let's go ahead and activate quick mask mode, painting with that same brush. Now you can see it paints green. But now when I hit the Q key or take it out of quick mask mode, it now is a selection. So I visually painted that selection in and now brought it back to the normal selection mode, which is the normal marching ants. We're going to do that very same thing with the gradient tool. Making sure we're using the second gradient going from black to transparent. We're going to start at the very bottom here, hold down my shift key, again making sure we're in quick mask mode. Let's hit the letter Q and it will highlight that. And I'm going to hold down the shift key, start at the bottom of the shape and draw the gradient up to the top. Just like that. So it draws that green gradient in there. So that tells us what our selection is going to look like. It's going to be selected fully down here, and then it will fade as it goes upward. So when I hit the letter Q key and go back, notice where the marching ant sits. They sit here right here in the middle because that is the midpoint of the gradient. That's where Photoshop assumes the midpoint is, and that's where it's going to place the marching ants. But it is still partially selected outside the boundaries of this marching ant selection. So when we apply our effect, which in this case we're going to go into the filter menu and go to blur, Gaussian blur, and we're going to give it a good size blur at about 25. Notice what happens. It blurs it heavily down here, and very subtly as it goes upward is getting less and less and less. In fact, I'm going to increase that blur just a little bit more. Let's take it to about 35. And then once I got that, we'll go ahead and click OK, and we'll go and deselect. So we've got that faded blur happening there. Well, here's going to do one more thing here. I'm going to lock the transparency of this layer. Actually, we're going to do a couple more things. I'm going to lock the transparency of this layer and making sure we're having the black and white foreground background color swatches. If they're not set to those default colors, simply press the D key on your keyboard and it will go in there. With that transparency locked, we're going to go into the filter menu and choose Render Clouds. And you can do it a couple of times. I'm just going to press Command F again, and it gives me a better distribution of those clouds there. And then I'm going to uncheck that lock transparency, and then I'm going to run a very, very small blur over the whole graphic. We did a very, very big blur up here that faded upward, but we're going to blur the overall graphic just to smooth out that clouds and these edges right in here a little bit more. So let's go under Filter, go to Blur, Gaussian Blur. And what we're ultimately trying to achieve here is, if you notice, if you've ever been to a concert or something like that, let's do a very small, let's go to about a 2. You've been to concerts and seen stage lights. There's smoke and stuff on the stages, and it tends to get in the beams of the lights. It's mainly the reason you can see the lights is because the smoke and dust particles are floating in those beams. So we're just kind of enhancing that effect here. So let's go ahead and distort this. I'm going to go ahead and press Command or Control T to bring up the free transform, and I'm going to control or right click directly on this, and then we're going to go over here and choose Distort. And that'll allow us to grab these corner handles and just push them in. I'm going to take these top 2 corner handles and push them in a little bit, and take these bottom handles and just fan them out just a little bit this way. Right about like that, and we'll click OK, and we look pretty good. So it's looking like a light beam with, it's kind of dissipating as it goes down. We need to add the light source up here. So I'm going to go over here and grab my elliptical marquee tool, and on a new blank layer, let's go ahead and create a new layer above that one. I'm going to go ahead and draw out a very small oval shape up here. And I'm just going to fill that with white. I'm going to press Command Delete, and it fills it with white real quick. I'm going to apply a little very small blur to this. Let's go and give it a Gaussian blur of about 3 pixels, I think. Will look pretty good. But then we're going to enhance that a little bit more by adding a quick layer style. I'm going to double click on this layer, and it will bring up the layer styles, and we're going to add an outer glow. And we're going to make sure that it's white. And let's increase that size quite a bit. So it really looks like a spotlight, and it's beaming straight down there. Now, if you wanted to enhance this a little bit more, if you press Command or Control T, so let's zoom in here so we can see what we're doing here. What I'm going to do is bring this controller, right-click directly on it, bring up the menu, and I'm going to choose Warp. And I'm just going to grab this bottom grid handle here and just kind of push this upward a little bit. And when I press Enter, look, it gives me a little bit of a bend here, so the light looks like it's more pointing down. It's got a couple of little segments there that we can probably do without. So let's take our eraser tool, relatively soft edge there, and just kind of nudge those out. Just like that. And that glow is going to stay intact because we've applied the layer style. If we just erased the shape that we blurred, then we would have to redo it again because it wouldn't look right. So if I zoom out now the light looks a little bit more realistic. It's beaming straight down. Everything looks pretty good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and merge these 2 layers together. I've got that light set, so I'm going to go ahead and press Command or Control E. So it merges it down together, and now we've got one single light. So now let's open up our original document here. Now, we see the silhouetted band, but I need them to be against a black background. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select that background layer and press Option Delete to fill it with the foreground color, which is black. And as you see, we lost the band. They're still there. You can see it's on its own layer, but it's up against the same color background, so it gets a little difficult to see. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go over here. We're going to take this light, and we're going to drag it on over into our document. So now you can start to see right away, it's starting to be a believable effect. It's one beam of light coming down. I am going to do this, so I'm going to add a quick layer mask on this, and just to enhance the transparency of the area down below, I'm going to run a quick gradient on that layer mask, starting from the bottom and just popping it up there a little bit. So I think that looks pretty good. So like if I drag this over, you can see the band's kind of in there. But let's change this up. I'm going to actually take this over. I'm going to make a couple of duplicates of this light. And let's drag and position some. Let's actually bring the free transform up and maybe rotate them a little bit. And let's take this other duplicate and drag it over. Maybe we'll take this one here. I'm just command clicking on each layer to select that layer, as you can see in the layers panel. If you hold down the Command or Control key and then click on the item, it will select it in the layers panel. So let's free transform and rotate this one just a little bit. And maybe drag that one down there a little bit. Maybe let's make one more duplicate and put a very small one. Not a very small one, but let's make this one seem like it's way back there. Just like that. Already it's starting to look really good, but we're going to enhance it a little bit more. I'm going to select that very bottom layer, and we're going to create a new blank layer above that one. And I'm just going to go ahead and run a full clouds filter on this. So we're going to render clouds. We're getting all of that. Going to pop a layer mask on that one, and let's take that gradient tool once again, going from black to transparent, and let's just mask this out towards the bottom of the stage. So it starts to look like there's smoke around in and around the lights, but there's also a lot of smoke that's starting to settle down in the stage area itself. Looking pretty good. Well, now I want to do one more thing. We would start to see a little bit of a halo of light on the band, considering the position of our lights. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into that band graphic, going to go ahead and double click on it and bring up the layer styles, and we're going to add a bevel and emboss. And I'm going to go take the shadow mode all the way down to 0, turn off use global light, and I'm just going to take that angle and pop it right up towards the top here. Let's make the size very small at around 2. So it starts to get a little bit of a bevel, kind of defining some shape, but it's really picking up the lights from our stage lights and everything like that. Looks pretty good. In fact, I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. Let's make it about a 1. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and click OK. So it's showing dimensions, showing lights, everything looks good. But here's the thing. It's black and white. We don't necessarily want it in black and white, but the reason we did it this way is because we can have the option of putting color in here and then changing it whenever we want to. With the very top layer selected, go under the adjustment layer menu and go up here to solid color. And let's go ahead and choose perhaps this red color here. And then you've got a solid color layer. Just change the layer's blend mode. Let's go and see what overlay does. There, it gives me a much more dramatic lighting effect. It looks really cool. And you can play with other blend modes to see what you get. You know, soft light's a little bit more subtle. Hard light's just going to blow it out altogether. So it looks like it's either going to be soft light or overlay in this case. And I think I like overlay the best. So here's the beauty. The color is on its own layer. All the individual elements are on their own layer. And I can move them around. Let's say I don't like the position of this one light. I want to move it over a little bit. Maybe rotate it. I can do that and everything looks great. So again, it's on its own layer. We can go up here. Let's say, oh, I want to see what it looks like in green. Looks pretty cool. Maybe blue or pink. It really doesn't matter. You can do all kinds of different combinations and see what kind of cool things you can come up with. But there you go, creating cool stage lights right there inside Photoshop. Give it a try yourself. Have fun. We'll see you next time.